I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. One of the many famous quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Here's more about the pastor, activist, and humanitarian who received the Nobel Peace Prize for combating racial inequality through nonviolence.
50 years ago, civil rights leader and Baptist minister Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. shared his dream of racial equality and nonviolence with America.
Will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream.
Each year, Americans pause to honor King on the third Monday in January and take a look back at where we as a society are in terms of Dr. King's dream. During his I Have a Dream speech, delivered in 1963 during the March on Washington, King spoke about a society where people are judged on the basis of their character, not the color of their skin, where all men are considered equal, and where anyone can be whatever they want. Martin Luther King Jr. challenged Americans' views about racial equality and acceptance. He preached service to the betterment of the world and to fellow man. The great thing about service, Dr. King was off to say, is that anyone can serve. Service, equality, and nonviolence were King's legacy. Martin Luther King Jr. used words instead of his fists to rally the American people. Through marches and speeches, King spread his message and his dream, and became one of, if not the most recognized civil rights leaders in American history. His methods were almost as important as his words. During the civil rights movement, the push for the recognition of racial equality was often a violent struggle on both sides. Dr. King instead pushed for a peaceful resolution. His message has endured and inspired the generations that followed him. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream has expanded beyond racial equality to become a platform for all demographics seeking equal treatment and rights. The realization of Dr. King's dream and where the country stands on civil rights 50 years later is a matter of perspective. Soldiers, civilians, and family members agreed that King's work is apparent 50 years ago, but many believed there is much more to be accomplished. That's why President Obama is urging Americans to join him in making Martin Luther King Jr. Day the start of a year of action.
Dee Dee Benke continues our discussions, and we are also joined by Raul, Ausa, and Monica Hall from Seton Hall University. We thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, 50 years later, Dr. Martin Luther King continues to influence history. From a personal level, I'm going to ask each one of you how he has personally influenced you. So Dee Dee, we'll start with you.
Well, I have to tell you, I think it's nice that Martin Luther King Day is coming on Monday. We can all really reflect, because this has been a rough year, if you think about it, for racial tension. And I think if we really think about the spirit of Martin Luther King, that we can all learn by it. So, I mean, and I think President Obama, too, so hopefully really will embrace that and talk about Martin Luther King and about how he used words instead of violence.
And do you say so because of obviously the Trayvon Martin
Absolutely.
case?
Yeah, I think it's been a fever pitch this year, unfortunately, so we need to tone it down and really think about the spirit of Martin Luther King. I think it's a good time for this to happen.
Absolutely. Let's talk to you, Monica. I know you were doing you do some work over at Seton Hall University. How has Dr. Martin Luther King, obviously 50 years after that speech, 51 years now, how has he influenced you?
Well, as an MLK Scholar, we really value service. So we learned that giving back to our communities is a part of our social responsibility. We have a duty to give back. I don't know if Raul wants to add on, but
Sure.
That's something that we're taught in our
Raul,
program.
what are your thoughts?
Well, the MLK Day of Service is really something that's important to us, again, because it is a large part of his message. But more than that, I think it's important that Martin Luther King is an inspiration, really, not just in terms of racial desegregation and racial integration, but in terms of really making comprehensively a better world. And so for me personally, the greatest inspiration that Martin Luther King's life and legacy have offered me is that he has inspired me and Monica and the rest of us MLK Scholars that change is possible, that we can have a better world. And through nonviolence, we can achieve those goals.
Oh, it's absolutely a wonderful message. If Dr. Martin Luther King were alive today, what would you like to ask him? I'll give you a moment to think about that. Dee Dee, what would you like to ask?
I'd like to ask him to join the Republican Party and run for president. I think he'd be a great president. I would vote for Dr. Martin Luther King for president.
Okay, that's it. Oh, you stunned me on that one.
Yeah.
I didn't think you were going to say that, but that's an interesting choice. Monica, Raul, what would you think?
On a personal level, because I'm interested in education, I would like to know Dr. King's views on charter schools. Charter schools are public schools that are operated by private funds and private entities. And in cities where I'm from, like Newark, there's a movement towards expanding charters rather than attacking the real issues in education reform. I would want to know what he thinks on
That's a very well thought out question for him. And of course, if we go across the river, if you will, right now charter schools are under attack in New York City with the new commissioner. So, Raul, what are your thoughts?
Well, personally, I would really want to know, in terms of his life, Martin Luther King was a person who faced a lot of adversity. For someone who was as idealistic as he was and wanted as much change as he was, he had to deal with so much backlash, so much pushback from the opposition. I would say for people like us who want to continue his legacy, who want to continue his work, what inspiration could he give us to keep going even when it becomes difficult, even when it seems that change is impossible?
It's another great point. Now, if he were again alive today, what do you think that he would think about, say, the advancements and some of the setbacks, as we saw in the Trayvon Martin case? But let's talk about the advancements right now. What do you think? I mean, obviously, I think he'd be incredibly proud. But what do you think he would say?
Well, I think with Barack Obama being our president, I mean, that's really, I mean, if you think about in the 60s, a lot of people would think that could have never happened.
Absolutely.
So that's a huge accomplishment and very, it's wonderful for our country. And
do you think that Obama would have been president if it hadn't been for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
Probably not. Probably not. That's how much Dr. Martin Luther King contributed to our country and to the world. So just an incredible individual.
What do you think he would say about the advancements and the work that has been achieved?
I would say Dr. King would be proud, but he would also agree that there is much work to be done, and he would say it will have to start with students like us. We are the future. We have to do the work. He would say that because the students are the ones who led the sit-in movements. They are the ones who did the work during his time, so we have to continue to do that now.
And we talk about like some of the inner city, but what do you think he would think about like hip-hop music and some of the lyrics that maybe are not do not promote nonviolence? What do you think he would say about things like that?
Well, I think for Martin Luther King, who studied sociology, and that was his main focus while he was an undergrad, he would look at the hip hop industry and the hip hop culture not as a problem in and of its own, but sort of a symptom of a much deeper societal problem. This sort of counterculture that comes with rap and the gangster rap movement wouldn't be possible if we didn't push people to the margins and tell them that they can't be a part of the wider society and that they have to have their own form of expression that has to sort of combat the rest of us.
Another interesting point. Now I want to talk to Raul and Monica about your work, your Martin Luther King Scholars. So just tell me a little bit about what that means and what you do.
As an MLK Scholar, we put on programs on Seton Hall's campus on different social issues throughout the year. So we always have a multicultural expo. We usually do a program on homelessness. We do programs on poverty. And we just pick different issues, maybe once a month or every few weeks. And we host them on campus. Sometimes they're open forums. We also have programs for high school students, middle school students, and even elementary students.
When you say like we as the college, like are you majoring in education? I'm just trying to figure.
Okay, so MLK Scholars get together, and a group of us and even other Seton Hall students participate in outreach programs. So we do mentoring, tutoring, we help with homework, and we go to different schools and we work with students.
Oh wow, okay, that's terrific. And Raul?
Oh, well, the program was started in 1970, originally as a minority scholarship to help bring in minority students to Seton Hall, which had recently become integrated. And we took Dr. Martin Luther King's name not just as, a pretty name to have as our namesake, but we wanted to establish an organization that could carry on his legacy and do his work in our context, in our area. And what we really want to do as the Martin Luther King Scholarship Association and the Martin Luther King Leadership Program is to take in students, train them in leadership roles, put them in situations where they can grow as leaders and grow as people. And then hopefully by the time they graduate, they will be future leaders of America who can go out and do change in the world.
Sounds like a terrific program. And so I'd like to talk about, because it was a piece of history, of American history, and we were talking about Trayvon Martin. But what we learned a lot from that case. We also learned that this country still has some issues with race. What do you think Dr. Martin Luther King would say if he were here and saw that verdict?
Well, I think he'd be very proud of these students, and I have to tell you, you are the future. That's exactly right. And if every Martin Luther King Day, if you had the education programs in all the schools throughout the country, that would be a big movement, and that'd be something that I think that Dr. King would be proud of, and proud of you all leading that.
And 51 years ago, of course, was when he made that speech. But in 50 years, where do you think, where would you like to see, I think all of us want to see, obviously, racial inequality be gone and everything, but where would you like to see this country be in 50 years?
Well, where it's not an issue, of course.
Right.
We hope that it's better, and I think because of Dr. Martin Luther King, it has gotten better. Think about how terrible it was in the 60s, and look where we are now. So that's good, but there's a long way to go, just like these students said. We have a long way to go, and much to the work of what you two are doing.
And it really is amazing, some of the work that you're doing. Do you think, one of the things that a lot of people have said, that folks that are about like 30 and younger, they don't see, they see more like the Modern Family, which is really quite amazing, as you pointed it out, as how different it has come since the 60s. So again, just so amazing about his work.
Well, and this is another thing too. I really think every student, every school should make sure that students are able to go and see Washington, D.C., where Martin Luther King, there. How many people? It was filled. The mall is a huge place. It was totally filled with his march. And I have to tell you, I have been to the memorial, and it is so beautiful.
It is powerful.
Have you all been? It is so powerful.
It's very
one of the most powerful memorials there. So yeah, all students should go.
Well, let me ask you another question about diversity. How has diversity affected your life in a positive way?
Well, I think it's difficult to imagine a life without diversity, really, having grown up in this sort of, we like to call it post-racial America, where we have had a lot of advancements, and my life has been very enriched by relationships with people who, my friendship with them 50 years ago would have been frowned upon or even illegal in certain places. So I think diversity really is inextractable from who we are as a society now.
And I'll ask what advice you have for young people today. When you go talk into the middle schools and high schools, what do you tell the young people?
I always tell my students that you have to find a mentor. You have to have someone that you look up to and who you can follow. So it might be a professor, it might be someone in the business world, but make sure you find someone who can mentor you and give you the tools that you need to get where you want to be. And
believes in you, and really has. I absolutely agree. Mentors are just so important. Any advice you have for the young people that you do mentor?
Well, I guess the only thing I would say is what I think King would say if he were alive today, which is that while we have made a lot of advancements, we can't rest on our laurels. We have to continually work for a better world where we all have access to our basic needs and where everybody has the opportunity to find happiness in their lives, which is really what Dr. King's idea of the beloved community was about.
Well, Raul, Ausa, and Monica Hall, we thank you so much from Seton Hall University. I agree with Dee Dee. You guys are doing just fantastic work out there. So thank you so much for explaining your scholar program, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, and when we come back, we will talk about another modern-day humanitarian who also became the highest-paid baseball player in the history of the game this week. We'll be right back with that story and much more.